one of the last ones before they take the summer break. I want to encourage everybody to give a like and subscribe if you haven't already. And, well, here we go.
To be this way. Conservatives have a positive plan that will allow everyone, every Canadian to get ahead. We will bring forward powerful paychecks, bring home safer streets, bring home lower prices, bring home recovery for our loved ones, and bring home freedom.
Bring it home.
Every Canadian. Your home, Mr. Speaker, my home, our home, friends. Let's bring it home.
Bring it home.
Lake Country.
Mr. Speaker, food, fuel, and housing are basic necessities of every
AAA question period.
Increases are increasing inflation and raising the cost of basic necessities. After 8 years, the Liberals refuse to see the light on how their inflationary carbon tax has made life unaffordable for many families while doing nothing for the environment. After 8 years, Canada now ranks 58th out of 64 countries on climate performance according to the Climate Change Performance Index. The Liberals have a tax plan, not an environmental plan. The cost to Canadians has been enormous. Liberals not happy with just Carbon Tax 1 now have Carbon Tax 2 coming on July 1st. Happy Canada Day with a new tax from the Liberals. Carbon Tax 2 will cost the average household over $1,100 per year once fully implemented. The combined carbon taxes will cost families 61 cents on every litre of gasoline. Conservatives will axe the carbon taxes and protect our environment through technology, not taxes, and give families hope.
The Honourable Member for Hochelaga. Mr. Speaker, this Saturday, June 24th, the ground in my riding of Hochelaga will be trembling with the dance steps of all those celebrating our Fête Nationale. Across Quebec, we'll be celebrating Saint Jean-Baptiste Day. This year, the people of Quebec are highlighting their love of dance and its place in Quebec culture. So whether you're a fan of a jig, square dance, modern jazz, or ballet, let's join in the dancing and celebrate with joie de vivre. Quebec is a strong and welcoming nation, open to diversity and proud of its heritage. Through dance, we honor our traditions that are rooted in the past, yet evolving with the times. We celebrate an inclusive Quebec where all are welcome. The member, I'd also like to pay tribute to Michel Côté, who will receive the Order of Quebec. He's one of the dominant figures in our pop culture, and he inspired a whole generation of Quebecers. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and happy Fête Nationale.
The Honourable Member for Churchill-Kiewetinoong-Aski.
Mr. Speaker, on this National Indigenous Peoples Day, we join in celebration and are reminded of the need for federal action on reconciliation. First Nations here require major federal investment in housing. In Shamattawa, Oxford House, Pucketawagan, Garden Hill, and many others, families struggle in third world living conditions because of a lack of federal funding and ongoing federal neglect. First Nations, like Tatasquiat Cree Nation, desperately need a new school for their young people. It's time for the Liberal government to build the school. First Nations deserve economic justice. As the fishers of Grand Rapids lost their fish shack to a fire, many are forced to pay out of pocket to truck their catch even further. They must be compensated. These are family and community sustaining jobs. Finally, First Nations and Métis youth in our north deserve investment. From recreation like soccer to after-school programming, Indigenous youth are leaders today, and we must support them. On this day, let's see the Government of Canada not just celebrate, but more importantly, act.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, on Saturday, Quebec will be celebrating its national holiday. Quebec is a proud nation. There are almost 9 million Quebecers, and we will always be one nation. There are many languages, but French is the only common language. And we should unite as a single nation that embraces diversity and has for countless years, because many people lived here before Quebec became a nation. All debate is fair game. Let's support this diversity as all democratic nations do. On Saturday, our nation will be singing with one voice for a greener future, Putting aside uncertainty, sharing smiles, of course, with sincere friendship and common convictions, and our identity grows richer every day for what could one day become a country for all. Let's dance and sing and love one another for everything we are. Happy National Holiday, Quebec.
Member for Stormont Dundas, South Glengarry.
After 8 years of Liberal scandals and ethics issues, here's a laundry list of wasteful spending growing by the day. $27 million in bonuses for federal housing bureaucrats as housing costs double and building of new homes is dropping. $116 million in consulting to the Prime Minister's buddies at McKinsey. $210 million to the Asian Infrastructure Bank that we will never see again after the Liberals admit it's being controlled by Beijing. $54 million for the Arrive scam app. And how can we forget the stunning $4.6 billion in COVID program abuse the Liberals just couldn't be bothered to recover. After 8 years, the wasteful spending has added to endless Liberal deficits and painful inflation, and now skyrocketing interest in mortgage rates for Canadians who are struggling to get by. Conservatives will bring down inflation, get our spending under control, and scrap the Liberal tax hikes punishing Canadians. After all, Mr. Speaker, it's just common sense. Let's bring it home.
Let's bring it home.
Member for Orleans. Mr. Speaker.
The beginning of graduation of our grade 12 students, and I want to take a moment to congratulate the 1,821 graduates from Orleans 10th High Schools.
I was at Giselle Lalonde Public Schools graduation this morning.
Don't forget to hit that like button, guys.
The Governor
We're trying to compete with CPAC right now.
Gibbings. Congratulations.
Got to get more people in here.
2023. Mr. Speaker, I'd also like to pay tribute on behalf of all members here in the House and all the staff. I'd like to pay tribute today to Nora Daigle, a constable at Parliament for over 20 years, who is retiring soon. Nora has deeply marked us all with her unfailing dedication and constant smile. As a former boxer, she embodies strength and determination, and her passion for photography and fine wine adds a touch of elegance to her personality. We wish her a long and happy retirement, and we thank her warmly for all her hard work. Thank you.
Oh, we're supposed to be clapping.
Following discussions among representatives of all parties in the House, I understand that there is an agreement to observe a moment of silence to commemorate National Indigenous Peoples Day and mark the discovery of the remains of 215 children at a former residential school in Kamloops.
I don't know if I'm supposed to take a moment of silence too. Feels a little weird doing that on live stream, so how about I just don't and I continue to try and fill the gap with pointless talking. I'm not sure what they're taking a moment of silence for. That works IRL. This is the internet. Doesn't work online. Sorry. Another great reminder to give a like on the stream if you haven't yet. Over 300 viewers, 67 likes as of right now. We've been doing a good job this week of getting more viewers in CPAC. How about let's keep that ball rolling?
Thank you. Merci. Oral questions?
Question orale, honorable leader of the opposition.
After 8 years of this Prime Minister and his anti-building and inflationary policies, Housing costs have doubled. In Quebec, in 1 year, average rent increased by 19% in some regions. It went up by 44% in Vancouver. In British Columbia, about 100,000 people could be on the streets because of rent increases. Will the Prime Minister finally inverse his anti-building and inflationist policies that have caused this housing crisis? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. If the Leader of the Opposition were to take this subject seriously, then he would have supported our measures. Our plan seeks to work with municipalities by investing $4 billion, for example, to accelerate approvals for home building, to create 100,000 new homing units, bridging infrastructure investments in housing, helping Canadians to save in order to buy their first house, offering assistance to first home buyers. We continue to be there to help housing. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
No, you don't.
Takes 25 years for the average Torontonian to save up for the average down payment on a house. Used to be you could pay off the mortgage in 25 years. Now that's what it takes just to get a down payment after this Prime Minister's anti-construction inflationary policies have doubled the cost of housing. He's done this with deficits that drive up interest rates and drive down salaries, and with funding bureaucracies that block home construction. Will he reverse the policies that caused the housing crisis so that Canadians can put roof overhead?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we had one of the strongest recoveries after the pandemic of all our peer countries, including seeing the creation of about 900,000 new jobs across the country as compared to before the pandemic. Our investments in supporting Canadians have made a real difference and have created growth in the economy. At the same time, we've continued to step up to support families in the construction of new homes, in working collaboratively with municipalities to improve densification, to accelerate zoning changes and permitting, to work to build more housing. The Conservative leader chooses to pick fights with municipalities. We're going to work collaboratively to get housing.
The Honourable Opposition.
How's that going for you?
Speaker, he tells Canadians they've never had it so good, but in reality, housing costs have actually doubled under his leadership. In fact, they're among the worst in the world. Vancouver is now the third most overpriced market, and Toronto the 10th. Both are worse than New York City, London, England, and even Singapore, a tiny island. In fact, the average house cost is almost double in Canada than it is in the States, where they have 10 times the people to house on a smaller landmass. His anti-construction inflationary policies are not working. Will he reverse them so that Canadians can get a roof overhead?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Would be nice if it was affordable.
Speaker, we all recognize across this House floor that Canadians are struggling with the cost of housing. The Conservative solution is to cut the programs that are supporting Canadian families, cut the programs.
They're not working, though.
Municipalities invest in accelerating housing, cut the programs that help Canadians save up for a first down payment, cut the programs that are delivering housing solutions.
Oh, he's already stuttering.
Recognize there is more to do, but it doesn't start by cutting the existing programs helping Canadians. We're going to continue to work in partnership with municipalities and help Canadians through these difficult times.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
His $80 billion of programs are not working. They have led to a doubling in the cost of an average down payment, double the necessary monthly mortgage payment, and a 120% increase in the average rent. This is way out of line with what is happening in other countries. Meanwhile, he continues to drive up interest rates on mortgages with his deficits and give money to local bureaucracies to block home building. Will he get off the backs and out of the way of Canadians so that they can finally afford a home?
Yep.
Right Honourable Prime.
Got to make housing more affordable, especially with 40 million population.
Only would the Conservative leader cut programs that are helping Canadians in what is, yes, a difficult housing market, but he's choosing to pick fights with municipalities when we should be working with them, as we are doing, to increase densification, to accelerate permitting, to change.
Accelerate permitting.
that we're infrastructure investments.
Oh, Pierre's going to rip into that one.
Making record numbers. 2, concentrations of housing and increasing housing stock. We know we need to continue to deliver more housing supply, and we're working with municipalities and provinces to do just.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, he can say all the right things, but he doesn't get anything done. I'll give you a perfect example.
Yep.
I know that he's trying to plagiarize my message on housing.
Oh!
The reality is he's $1 billion housing
Sorry for yelling.
accelerator fund that has decelerated home building. Home building is actually down 19%. Versus what it was before he brought in this acceleration program. So instead of just spending money irresponsibly, why won't he tie dollars to houses that are actually complete?
Wow. Good job, Pierre. That was really well spoken.
Mr. Speaker, I'll certainly accept the compliment that we're saying all the right things, and I'll add to it because we are doing the right things, Mr. Speaker. As we step up,
Nah, that wasn't very good.
Tax savings, tax-free account. As we work with municipalities to deliver on accelerated housing construction in partnership and the kinds of ways that we get things done, instead of picking fights like the conservative conservative leader continues.
Conservative government.
On helping.
Oh, he choked again. He choked again.
The Honourable Member for Bailey-Chambly.
Oh my God, that's funny.
Northern Quebec is still tackling serious forest fires. The same is true elsewhere in Canada. There are some companies that are suffering. Big companies have the capacity to weather the storm, but small and medium-sized companies are hurting and might have to go bankrupt. We've made proposals to help these companies. I would like to hear if the Prime Minister is ready to sit with us rapidly and to sit with industry in order to rapidly implement urgent programs. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we stand in solidarity with those in Canada and Quebec who have been affected by fires. Safety is our priority. That is why we immediately responded to Quebec's call for aid. We will continue to work together with provinces and territories throughout this difficult period until we come back in September, and we will continue to support forestry sector workers in Quebec and Canada and other sectors that have been affected by forest fires. Through Budget 2023, we've implemented measures with substantive.
What a failure of a budget.
Important investments. Given how little time we have left, I would have to ask the Prime Minister to be a bit more precise. Businesses, and therefore many workers, have a very short-term, acute error problem that may lead to bankruptcies. Measures have to be quick. To facilitate the process, we took inspiration from measures implemented for SMEs during the pandemic. The model already exists. It could be applied rapidly because the summer isn't over and the situation is serious. Could we act together and now? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, we reacted to a pan-Canadian crisis with pan-Canadian tools. In this situation, these are companies in a number of provinces that have been affected, and that is exactly why we are working with the provinces in question. The Quebec government knows full well that Canada will be here as a partner, including through our assistance programs for disasters that they will be able to use. We will be there and we will work with the government of Quebec.
They're not doing a good job of working with other provincial governments.
For Nunavut.
This morning, I was honored to attend the raising of the survivors' flag. I thought of Monica Ituksakjak, Ernie Bernhardt, Marilusi Uvilok, and the late Mary Yus Tungilik, and especially my mom, Carmen Idlaut, who survived these horrible institutions. Survivors without intention pass on trauma to the next generations. This government's inaction allows intergenerational trauma to continue. When will this government act to ensure that future generations can live with pride, dignity, and respect?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I thank the honourable member for being there at this important celebration this morning. I was touched to see so many people there as well, because today, June 21st, is a celebration of Indigenous language, culture, as at the same time we recognize the terrible intergenerational traumas and the impacts of residential schools. So it is with mixed feelings that we continue to work together in partnership with Indigenous communities across the country, whether it's on housing, whether it's on health, whether it's on resolving land claims, and continuing to support Indigenous leadership. We will continue the path.
There's so many Indigenous places that don't even have clean drinking water, which the Liberals promised.
The honourable member for Nunavut.
All I heard is empathy. What Indigenous is action. Narrows is still waiting for this government to.
I've never seen her clap like that.
Build the mercury poisoning care home in Grassy Narrows after decades of toxic drinking water. Just like the nations across this country, they are left waiting for this government to keep a promise they made years ago. Indigenous peoples have heard empty words for decades. Will this government finally deliver the treatment center that Grassy Narrows desperately?
The right honour.
Holy crap!
Mr. Speaker, we've been working with Indigenous communities right across the country on responding to their needs. The situation in Grassy Narrows that has gone on for far too long is one that we continue to engage in, working closely with local leadership. Moving forwards on giving the kinds of supports necessary. We recognize the scale of the challenges across the country, and we will continue to
notice how he didn't provide a solution.
Partnership in meaningful, serious ways, as we always.
Bunch of bullshit.
The honourable leader of the opposition.
The Prime Minister expects to be judged on his promises rather than his results. The results are these. 8 years ago, housing was affordable, taking a modest 40% of average income to pay mortgages on an average house, something that's now up to 60%. Wow. The average cost of a house has nearly doubled. The cost of a mortgage payment has doubled. The cost of monthly rent has doubled. It's doubled trouble after 8 years of this Prime Minister. Unfortunately, he wants to keep doing what caused the problem in the first place. Will he instead stop funding gatekeeping that blocks construction and bring down the deficits that are driving up mortgage rates?
The right honourable Prime Minister.
It's interesting that the member opposite talks about what happened 8 years ago, because when we formed government, we realized that the previous federal government had done nothing on housing for close to 10 years. They had removed the federal government from any leadership role or partnerships around housing from the, which is part.
They like to live in the past, eh?
Challenges over the past decade in responding to the growth and needs of housing across this country, which is why we also put into place in 2017 a national housing strategy that has led millions of Canadians to get into new residences and refurbished homes across the country, why we've continued to invest and step up.
The honourable leader of the opposition.
Mr. Speaker, his main criticism seems to be that the previous Conservative government didn't hold enough meetings. Or spend enough money. What we actually delivered was affordable housing. The average house cost $450,000.
Yes, sir.
Rent back then was about 50% of what it is today. And Mr. Speaker, now Canada has the fewest houses per capita in the G7. We have fewer houses per capita than when he took office 8 years ago, at a time when house construction actually dropped off. So will he get out of the way, let Canadians build, and let them put roof overhead?
The right honourable Prime.
Very well said, Pierre.
We all remember well that the previous Conservative government didn't spend enough money investing in Canadians, didn't support our veterans, didn't support builds in infrastructure, cut and slash programs, cut programs for seniors and for youth, raised the retirement age to 67 so that they could balance the budget in a fictional way for an election. Canadians saw through that and had them lose that election, Mr. Speaker. And we've stepped up to continue to invest in Canadians, continue to invest in housing, continue to invest in supports that have seen the economy grow, Mr. Speaker, have seen record job creation and record numbers of people live.
The honourable leader of the opposition.
Here we go, Pierre.
So he says that his real criticism is that our programs were not expensive enough for taxpayers, Mr. Speaker. The fact is, it's bad enough for him to fail. It's even worse for him to fail expensively. And that's what he's have an $80 billion housing program that has left us with the fewest houses per capita in the G7, even though we have the most land to build on. Fewer houses per capita than when he took office. We now have almost double the house price in Canada versus the U.S., where they have 10 times the people to house on a smaller landmass. So why doesn't he stop judging himself by how much he can spend instead of judging by how much he can get done?
The Right Honourable Prime.
As a man should be judged.
Mr. Speaker,
what he does.
Consistently get up and say what we really need to grow the economy and help Canadians is cuts. Cuts in the investments we're making for Canadians, cuts in the programs that are helping Canadians afford new homes, cuts in the programs that are incentivizing municipalities to increase density and accelerate house building. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, that proposal of cuts and austerity is exactly why the Conservatives had such an underwhelming night on Monday night in those by-elections, Mr. Speaker. Canadians know they need a government that has their backs. That's what we're...
Oof.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
I mean, that was a pretty strong clapback.
Mr. Speaker, just because he makes housing more expensive to taxpayers doesn't excuse the fact that he's made it more expensive for home buyers. Right. The reality he's tried to plagiarize my message on the need to get housing built by inventing a $4 billion accelerator program. Since that time, housing construction has decelerated. Right. This year, according to his own housing agency, there will be fewer houses built than last year, 19% fewer. So why won't he actually take my policy, which is to link the number of dollars that cities get to the number of houses that get completed?
Let's see if Trudeau plagiarizes that.
The $4 billion Housing Accelerator Fund was actually a corner piece of our last election campaign, but apparently the current leader of the official opposition was too busy sharpening his knives to pay attention to our platform in the last election.
I don't think I understand that reference.
Commitment and focus on delivering for Canadians while he continues to propose cuts.
That went right over my head.
The noise level is starting to go up, and I understand this is like year end for students in a classroom, and everyone's excited. But I'm going to ask everyone to just take a deep breath, and maybe, the Prime Minister had 10 seconds left if he wants it. It's good? Okay, we'll go over to the Leader of the Opposition, and let's keep everything respectful. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The Right Honourable. Pierre keeps getting mistaken.
The Prime Minister says there's no room for savings in his sumptuous government spending. Well, I found some. For example, he gave CMHC $26 million in bonuses for making housing less affordable. He paid $181,000 for the Governor General's travel, $116 million for McKinsey, a company that supports him but actually helped cause the opioid crisis, $54 million for the ArriveCan app, $6,000 for one night in a hotel for the Prime Minister.
Oh!
Pass on that spending and put the money back in Canadians' pockets.
Yeah!
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what the Conservative leader continues to put forward is a program of cutting programs for Canadians, whether it's billions of dollars for childcare at $10 a day right across the country that he continues to campaign against, whether it's investments in a climate action incentive that both puts a price on pollution and puts more money back in the pockets of 8 out of 10 Canadians that he would cancel. That's money in the pockets of families in his riding that he would cancel. Whether it's moving forward on things like a grocery rebate or a doubling of the GST tax credit that has helped out 11 million Canadians and will continue to support seniors and young people.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Here we go, Pierre.
A real plan to make housing affordable. Balance the budget to bring down inflation and interest rates on Canadians' mortgages. Require that cities increase the number of permitted homes by 15% in order to get more infrastructure money and pay the money out once the houses are completed and the keys are indoors. require every federally funded transit station have high-density housing all around it, and sell off 6,000 underutilized federal buildings to convert them into affordable housing and use the proceeds to reduce the deficit. How's that for a plan?
Whoa! Never have they offered a real solution
Any of those elements
in the House of Commons.
The plan are things that we are already very much working on. But the one place we disagree is...
But they've never publicly announced it. Great move by Pierre.
To low-income Canadians, to cut supports with things like a housing benefit that he not only voted against, but he delayed passage in the House when we were offering a $500 top-up to low-income Canadians. He has consistently stood against the kinds of supports and investments in Canadians, offering instead cuts and austerity at a time where Canadians need continued support. And on fiscal responsibility, Mr. Speaker, we're still at the top of the class in the G7.
Pierre gets that W.
That
was awesome.
Forest fires are the source of the motion on the environment that the Bloc Québécois adopted in this House. The Prime Minister himself supported the motion, which recognises that the federal government must do more to fight climate change. I'd like to remind him of how he voted before we start talking about oil. His government is currently considering whether to authorise Suncor to begin 16 exploratory wells off the coast of Newfoundland. Does the Prime Minister agree that doing more to combat climate change starts with saying no to future oil projects like this one? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we're not approving drilling on Anticosti Island. We're defending our fight against climate change, reducing greenhouse gases.
No more oil.
To be
oil bad.
That we need oil for a little while longer. This balance has allowed us to reduce greenhouse gas emissions for the first time in Canadian history. We are reaching our Paris Agreement and Glasgow Agreement targets. We will continue to show leadership and responsibility by creating economic growth for everyone. The Honourable Member for Avignon-Métis-Matane-Matapédia. Mr. Speaker, we tabled that motion to end our session on a consensus. We have to do more to make sure that natural disasters don't become a normal thing. We have to make difficult decisions to do so. Everyone knows that the main accelerator of climate change is fossil fuels, but the federal government allows oil companies to continue drilling and exploring. We need to reduce production, but Ottawa is still thinking about increasing production. Can the Prime Minister say that at least new oil projects are coming to an end? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. The imperative thing is to reduce...
It's crazy how against oil they are.
Gases that lead to climate change, and we have shown our capacity as a government to do so, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions that Canada is responsible for, and we continue to do so. We know that the world still needs energy, and that is why we are investing in hydrogen, in nuclear energy, in wind energy.
He doesn't want nuclear energy. That's a lie.
Many different opportunities to create the energy that the world will need towards net zero. Until then, we're still here to try and reduce our gas emissions linked to fossil fuels. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Instead of removing bureaucratic obstacles to allow Quebec to build a greater number of green hydroelectric projects, the Prime Minister and the Bloc want to impose a second carbon tax on Quebecers that will increase the cost of gas by 20 cents per litre. This will also increase the cost of food because farmers and producers will have to pay more for energy in order to produce this food. Instead of harming consumers in Quebec and Canada, why not remove barriers so that Quebec can create even more green electricity? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Once again, the leader of the Conservative bloc, or the Conservatives rather, shows that he knows nothing about what's happening in Quebec. There's no first price on pollution in Quebec from the federal government because they have their own approach. And second of all, in Budget 2023, we've put forward a proposal to give huge tax credits to create green energy in Quebec and throughout the country. This is the kind of thing that will create better opportunities for Quebecers so that they can have a green economy in a net zero world.
Quebecers will have to pay more. For July 1st, the Prime Minister plans to hit Atlantic Canadians with a massive new tax hike at the pump. Happy Canada Day, everyone. The Prime Minister wants you to pay more. Now, the Newfoundland Liberal Premier says that this will do nothing for the environment, but it will make his people go cold in the winter and hungry all year long. Why won't he axe the carbon tax and finally come up with a real environmental plan?
There you go, instead of a tax scam. We're not stupid.
On pollution, and we are now seeing the emission reductions right across the country. Canada
yeah, right.
Targets both for 2030 and towards net zero. That's what we've done by putting a price on pollution. But at the same time as we put a price on pollution right across, ensure the price on pollution right across the country, we are delivering more money back to Canadians in the jurisdictions where the federal backstop is in place. That's more money in the pockets of Atlantic Canadians starting this July as we fight climate change that is having an impact, whether it's on hurricanes or forest fires, that Atlantic Canadians hear too strongly.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
He has not hit a single solitary environmental target with his tax, and Canada ranks 58th out of 64 countries in the Climate Performance Index. His plan is not working. It's just costing more. In fact, the Premier of Newfoundland said that the Prime Minister's claim that we need a tax to save the environment is completely illogical, a false dichotomy, a false dilemma, and it is as insulting as it is simplistic. The unanimous opinion of Atlantic premiers is that this tax will hurt their people without helping the environment. Why won't he axe his plan to raise gas prices by 61 cents a litre?
Yeah. You're not going to solve the weather with taxes.
Speaker, while energy companies are making record profits right now across the country, Canadians need support, and that's why we are delivering a climate action incentive that delivers more money every 3 months to Canadians than the price on pollution costs them. And everyone, except apparently the Conservatives, understands that building in price signals on things you don't want, like pollution, is one of the most efficient ways of reducing emissions, of incentivizing behavior, and that's why our emissions are going down and we're hitting our targets, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
He has not hit a single solitary climate target since he brought this tax in, and according to the parliamentary budget officer whom he appointed, in every province in Canada, this tax will cost families more than they get back in these phony rebates. In fact, it will be over $2,000 for the average family per year. The plan is to raise the tax to 61 cents a litre. Canadians cannot afford to eat, heat, and house themselves. So why does he axe the tax so we can bring home lower prices?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
You'd think that that's common sense.
The Conservative leader is desperate to demonstrate why not taking action in fighting climate change is the best solution for Canadians. Well, Canadians only have to look out the windows, Mr. Speaker, at wildfires, at atmospheric rivers, at intense hurricanes like Fiona, to know that we have to continue to step up in the fight against climate change. But what we've been able to do is not only return more money with the rebate, including $1,000 a year in the riding of Carleton for the average family of four, but move forward on drawing in investments like Volkswagen, Rio Tinto, Stellantis, and others that continue.
That the government bribed to get here?
Canada, because...
Are you kidding me?
The Honourable Member for Winnipeg Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A CBC report card on the government's progress in implementing the calls for justice from the National Inquiry into Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women and Girls got a failing grade. Only 2 of the 231 calls for justice have been fully implemented to date. Unacceptable. The Liberals must implement all the calls for justice now and put in place a red dress alert system to keep Indigenous women, girls, and diverse gendered folks safe. Yes. Why isn't the Prime Minister acting with urgency in the face of an ongoing genocide?
Whoa.
Speaker, our hearts are with survivors 1,000 families of missing and murdered Indigenous women.
What a load of crap.
Plus people. Addressing this ongoing violence requires living up to our goals as a country.
Why is he talking about
the calls?
The alphabet mafia.
Taking a whole of government approach, $125 million to implement the National Action Plan for MMIWG. We've appointed a special rep to consult on the creation of an Indigenous and human rights ombudsperson, $4 billion to support Indigenous housing needs, and we're working to implement a red dress alert. We agree, Mr. Speaker, there's always more to do, but we are taking this seriously and working in partnership with Indigenous peoples right across the country.
Hear, hear. The honourable member for Winnipeg Centre.
Enough with the platitudes, Mr. Speaker.
Whoa.
Now, this Prime Minister acknowledged this as an ongoing genocide. This House unanimously recognized the violence against Indigenous women, girls, and diverse gendered folks as a Canada-wide emergency. And almost 4 years since the national inquiry, only 2 calls to justice have been addressed. When will the Prime Minister implement the red dress alert and the remaining calls to justice? We are a target. Our lives are on the line. Our lives matter, Mr. Speaker.
Holy crap!
Mr. Speaker, I understand how much more there is to do, but to dismiss $4 billion in housing investments for Indigenous people as platitudes is not doing justice to the incredible Indigenous leaders that are working across the country to deliver for their citizens in partnership with the federal government. It is to dismiss the hard work Indigenous leaders are doing to create more housing, to create more safe spaces, to create shelters. $100 million to create 22 new Indigenous shelters and transitional homes are not platitudes, Mr. Speaker. We are working seriously, and we look forward to continuing to work with all members in this House on reconciliation.
Wow.
The honourable member for
Trudeau just
on Monday
got destroyed.
Rejected the Conservative Party's failed approach under their new leadership and instead opted in favour of delivering real results for Canadians today and for generations to come. Whether in Quebec, the Prairies, or southwestern Ontario, we see Canadians supporting this Liberal government's approach to creating jobs and creating and ensuring a clean, growing economy of the future. Can the Prime Minister inform the constituents?
I'm sorry. I'm going to have to interrupt.
I didn't hear any questions.
Things are getting crazy.
The honourable member for Châteauguay-Lacolle from the top, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I can bring it home. Mr. Speaker! On Monday, Canadians clearly
That's the Conservatives going crazy.
approach under their new leadership and instead opted in favour of delivering real results for Canadians today and for generations to come. Whether in Quebec, the Prairies, or southwestern Ontario, we see Canadians supporting this Liberal government's approach to creating jobs and ensuring a clean, growing economy of the future. Can the Prime Minister inform the constituents of NDG Westmount and Winnipeg South Centre what their new Liberal members of Parliament will fight for?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Monsieur le Président, je remercie la députée de Châteauguay.
I thank the honourable member for Châteauguay-Lacolle for her question and for her hard work. I want to congratulate all the candidates for the recent by-election and welcome Anna Gainey and Ben Carr.
They're not even members. They're not even sworn in yet.
This is getting out of hand, guys.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister from the top, please.
Monsieur le Président, je remercie la députée de Châteauguay.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the member for Châteauguay-Lacolle for her question and for her hard work. I'd like to congratulate all of the recent by-election candidates and welcome Anna Gainey and Ben Carr to this House.
Ontario, Manitoba had a choice between the Conservative Party's divisive rhetoric, austerity, and cuts, or our plan to continue to strengthen the middle class, make life more affordable, fight climate change, and so much more. Now, there's a lot more hard work left ahead of us, and our team will be even stronger with these 2 new strong voices in Ottawa.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Monsieur le Président, les augmentations.
Mr. Speaker, the extreme increase of interest rates is unprecedented. It was caused by the inflationary deficits of this government. Canadians are worried about losing their homes. According to the Bank of Canada, the average Canadian can expect a 40% increase in mortgage payments.
That's insane, man.
The International Monetary Fund says that Canada is the most at risk for a bankruptcy crisis. Will this government commit to reducing these inflationary deficits and allow Canadians to enjoy better economic circumstances that will let them keep their homes? We have the lowest deficit in the G7. We have the best GDP to debt ratio, and we have a AAA credit rating. According to credit agencies around the world, we have a fiscally responsible approach to protect our economy and generate growth. At the same time, we're investing to support low-income Canadians and help people buy a new home, as well as invest with municipalities to create more housing and generate more construction of new housing. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
This Prime Minister, it now takes well over 60% of a family's pre-tax income to make monthly payments on an average house. That's mathematically impossible, but possibly about to get worse. The Prime Minister's inflationary deficits are driving up interest rates faster than at any time since any of us have been alive. This means that Canadians could face 40% increases in their monthly payments. There may be another bank rate increase this summer that will push Canadians to bankruptcy. Before the Canadians lose their homes, will he get rid of his inflationary deficits to bring down those terrible mortgage rates?
Yeah.
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Canada has the lowest deficits in the G7. We have the best debt to GDP ratio.
You think he's going to say AAA credit rating?
7 as well. And we are one of the 3 largest economies in the world, along with Germany and the United States, to have a triple A from the bond rating agencies. Our fiscal plan as we continue to invest to support low-income Canadians, to support municipalities in building more housing, to move forward in a plan while the Conservative Government Party once again continues to talk about cuts in programs, cuts in services, cuts for Canadians.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Canada has the worst household debt in the G7, by far the worst, and that debt risks rates rise. Now, Mr. Speaker, one of the ways the Prime Minister has been wasting money is he gave $210 million to the Asian Infrastructure Bank, which is controlled by Beijing and designed to build the infrastructure of Beijing's communist empire throughout Asia. We warned him 5 years ago, and now some of that bank's own executives are speaking out against it. He claims he's stalling his involvement in the bank, but the real question is, when will we get our $200 million back?
Yeah.
Honourable Prime Minister.
Canada has long been involved in investing in infrastructure around the world because we know that it creates growth and opportunity in the global south. It continues to contribute to fighting climate change as people are building more resilient infrastructure and indeed in energy infrastructure. And we are part of multilateral development banks all around the world. But as the Leader of the Opposition pointed out, we are reviewing our participation in the Asian Infrastructure Bank, and we'll make the decision that's right for Canadians.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
So he's defending the $200 million he gave to a bank one of whose executives said, and I quote, "I didn't find a single tangible benefit to communicate back home here to Canada of what this bank does that is consistent with our values in a way that would benefit Canadians." That the Prime Minister, while Canadians are starving and can't heat their homes, he's forcing them to give $200 million to this bank, controlled by Beijing, to expand a communist empire in Asia. Mr. Speaker, when will Canadians get their $200 million back from this liberal-friendly bank?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
As I said, we are evaluating our continued participation in this multilateral development bank controlled by Beijing. We continue to look very, very carefully at
controlled by Beijing
around the world with investments in infrastructure and how we're delivering for Canadians in the fight against climate change, in growth around the world that benefits Canadians, and in participation in supports for the global south.
L'honorable député de Trois-Rivières.
The Honourable Member of Trois-Rivières. Mr. Speaker, sessional review of federal politics observers are identical. The story of this session is about the 4 months wasted by the Liberals trying to avoid a commission of inquiry into Chinese interference. This waste of time is what everyone's remembering because of this government's obstinacy in continuing to defy the will of the people in the House. Mr. Speaker, it is more than time to move on to the next step. The government says that it's being open and the Bloc Québécois is cooperating. Will the Prime Minister finally announce a public and independent commission of inquiry into foreign interference? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the fight against foreign interference in our democratic institutions is a nonpartisan issue. The Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs talked to leaders of the opposition considering the next steps and is establishing a consensus that will lead to a nonpartisan process, and we will move forward together.
Honorable député de Laurentides-Labelle.
The Honourable Member for Laurentides-Labelle.
Tout est pourtant déjà en place pour qu'on puisse passer.
And yet, Mr. Speaker, everything's in place to proceed. The Bloc Québécois is cooperating. The Prime Minister knows he can count on the NDP to do whatever they want to do. The public is behind us. The Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs is holding constructive discussions with the opposition, which we welcome. If the Prime Minister does indeed intend to launch a commission of inquiry, the stars will never align any better. Will he finally announce this inquiry so that it can finally get to work and so that we can
do it.
Finally
call it before summer break?
To the next caller. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Work is ongoing in order to counter foreign interference. NSICOP, NSIRI, and other institutions. We want to work with opposition parties. I thank them for the cooperation we have observed. Canadians know full well that we need a process that's not going to lead to toxic partisan attacks as we saw before. We are coordinating parties to set something up that will work and take it seriously. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Admitted, and I quote, that the Asian Infrastructure Bank is controlled by Beijing. He says he's not going to get our money back. He's just going to review our participation. While Canadians can't afford to eat, heat, or house themselves, he's forcing them to give almost $250 million to this Beijing-backed bank. So once again, je pose la question, est-ce que le...
I ask the question once more. Will the Prime Minister get our money back from this bank, which he admits is controlled by Beijing? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, our commitment to the construction of infrastructure throughout the world, especially in emerging countries in the South, means that we make investments for roads, for power plants, and for other projects in the South. We will continue to do so. We are reassessing our participation in the Asian Investment Bank, and we're going to share our conclusions with Canadians when we conclude our assessment. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. On the question of foreign interference in our democracy, I've already talked to this Prime Minister about the Conservative Party's support. We're ready to provide names and mandates as soon as the Prime Minister announces that a public inquiry starts. They want to set up a call with opposition parties tomorrow. Will, finally, the Prime Minister announce a public inquiry into...
Do it before summer break. We're running out of time.
Protect our democracy before we hold more elections. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I recognize that opposition parties are now ready to work together to establish a process that will work well. You will understand that, having seen how opposition parties behaved in the last months, in the face of a former Governor-General, we want to make sure that everyone agrees on the framework, the people who will participate, and we don't want to fall back into personal attacks, which will undermine Canadians' confidence in their institutions, the Leader of the Opposition.
Prime Minister jetted off to New York for a weekend with celebrities, and now we know the price tag. while Canadians can't eat, heat, or house themselves, he stuck them with a $61,000 bill just for the hotels of himself and his entourage. One weekend, $61,000 of fun. Mr. Speaker, Canadians cannot pay their own bills. They certainly can't afford to pay his. Will he commit to paying for his own vacations this summer?
Wow.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I was pleased to be in New York to meet with Ursula von der Leyen, Mia Mottley, to engage in important conversations about the future of our economy, of the fight against climate change. These are things that matter. It was a midweek trip, and I actually happen to know that former Prime Minister Harper was also attending meetings at the same time we were down there with the same organization. These are things that matter in terms of Canada's leadership in the world. It matters in terms of outcomes for Canadians. We will continue to do the work that Canadians expect of this government to lead on the global stage.
The honourable member for Kings Hants.
Mr. Speaker, it's clear that the Conservative Party no longer resembles those led by Joe Clark, Brian Mulroney, or even Stephen Harper. The leader of the official opposition is taking the Conservatives into the ditch on the far right to outflank Max Bernier by spewing conspiracy theories about the World Economic Forum, supporting candidates against reproductive rights and promoting hate against LGBTQ plus communities. It's the same playbook we've seen in the United States. Can the Prime Minister reassure my constituents, including those who identify as progressive Conservatives, that our Liberal government is the best vehicle to drive Canada forward?
What is any of this? Did he bring up Max Bernier? Oh, Andrew Scheer's pissed. Probably has a point of order.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to double check on that. Does not qualify as a question. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Order. Order. Order.
You're not allowed to bring up the World Economic Forum.
Order.
In the House anymore. So everyone's like on super big red alert right now.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The Public Safety Minister has presided over a 32% increase in violent crime under this government. The Public Safety Minister misled hunters when he planned to ban their rifles. The Public Safety Minister sat on information about the transfer of one of Canada's most notorious killers to have more freedom and comfort by getting him out of maximum security prison when he could have passed a law to prevent it. Will the Prime Minister commit today to firing his incompetent public safety?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Leader talks about freedom, but he's all talk, no walk on freedom when he handpicks candidates who want to take away Canada's freedoms. So let me be very clear. Everyone has the freedom to love whom they love. Everyone has the freedom to choose what they do with their own bodies with safe access to abortion. And
I'm sorry, it's starting to get noisy in here again, and we're getting close to the end, and I'm wondering whether I start bouncing around with whatever's left. But look, I think everybody's excited to get out of here, and I understand that. So let's start at
he's talking to them like they're kids. What the heck?
Breath. And listen to each other. Listen to the question and listen to the answers. The Right Honourable Prime Minister from the top, please.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservative leader is all talk, no walk when it comes to freedom, when he handpicks his candidates who want to take away Canadians' freedoms. So let me be very clear. In Canada, everyone has the freedom to love whom they love. Everyone has the freedom to choose what they do with their own bodies with safe access to abortion. And everyone has the freedom to move safely in their communities without damaging blockades. On this side of the House, Mr. Speaker, and in our candidates, we will always stand up for Canadians' freedoms.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Order. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
the only thing he has done is free Paul Bernardo from a maximum security penalty.
Whoa!
Relative freedom in a place where he can have access to other people, where he has more comforts and more can put guards in danger. Now, the Prime Minister interfered with Corrections Canada's decisions by introducing Bill C-83 that allowed this kind of transfer to go ahead. The Minister of Public Safety knew the transfer, his office knew at least, for 3 months while he claimed that they couldn't walk down the hallway and tell him. He is incompetent. Will the Prime Minister fire him, yes or no?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we know how difficult this decision is for families of the victims. We share the deep concerns that Canadians have.
All he has is empathy and not solutions. It's so annoying.
Persons is an independent decision made by the Correctional Services of Canada. Following outreach by the Minister of Public Safety, the Commission ordered an additional review that is underway and will be completed soon.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
So that the minister can actually order reviews, which means he can also issue directives to ensure that all mass murderers are kept in maximum security penitentiaries. He could also adopt our law today, which would require that every mass murderer stay in a maximum security penitentiary. That would be an apolitical way to solve the problem, but they haven't done that, even though the minister knew about this problem, or ought to have known, 3 months ago. So can the Prime Minister confirm, will this public safety minister still have that job when we come back here in the fall?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Talking about Marco.
Being there and supporting victims is always top of mind for this government. After learning of the transfer, the minister was in touch with the commissioner, and the commissioner has now ordered an additional review that is now underway and will be completed soon.
Interesting that Marco can't get up
Vancouver Sunshine Coast, Sea to Sky Country.
and speak for himself.
Mr. Speaker, today on National Indigenous Peoples Day, we recognize and celebrate the important contributions of Indigenous people to our country, as well as the diverse culture, language, and heritage of Indigenous peoples. In my riding, I think of the work of the Lil'wat Nation to restore language through their education programs, the Sechelt Nation becoming the first self-governing nation in Canada and obtaining justice for day scholars, and the transformative developments of the Squamish Nation with the Sanok housing development in a way that highlights their heritage. While much work has been done on the road to reconciliation, much remains to do together. Can the Prime Minister please update this House on the forthcoming release of the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Action Plan?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the member for West Vancouver Sunshine Coast, Sea to Sky Country for his question and his hard work. Today, on National Indigenous Peoples Day, we released our action plan to implement the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, developed in partnership with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. The Conservative leader voted against that bill and associated himself with those who deny the realities of residential schools. Mr. Speaker, Canada cannot go backwards. We must always choose to confront the truth and strive to right these wrongs.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Griesbach.
In Edmonton, 58% of those currently houseless identify as Indigenous. Under the Liberal government, Indigenous people are now 11 times more likely to use a shelter or live in inadequate homes than non-Indigenous people. New Democrats have been calling on this government to address the housing crisis First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities have had to deal with. So when will this government finally start to invest properly in a for Indigenous, by Indigenous housing strategy so that everyone can live with safety and dignity?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
The answer is when? In Budget 2023, that's exactly what we did. We committed to working with Indigenous peoples to co-develop an urban, rural, and northern Indigenous housing strategy. Budget 2023 includes an additional investment of $4 billion in this Indigenous housing strategy, on top of the $6.7 billion since 2015. Housing remains a top priority as part of reconciliation, and we will continue to work with partners on this right.
The Honourable Member for Spadina, Fort York.
Mr. Speaker, Canada Day is quickly approaching, and to celebrate, the Liberal government is giving the gift to Canadians of another tax, the clean fuel.
Yeah.
But the
good job, Independent.
Our Canadians' pocketbooks, as independent analysis has found that it actually increases net greenhouse gas emissions, and this time with no rebate. Thanks to the NDP, British Columbia already has one in place, which is costing British Columbians 17 cents per litre. Can the Prime Minister share with Canadians how much the rest of the country will have to pay for his overspending and for his latest tax grab?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Well said.
Canadians have seen across the country, whether it was Hurricane Fiona on the East Coast, whether it's forest fires raging across the country with greater intensity than previous years, or whether it's the atmospheric river BC was hit with just a few years ago, the cost of inaction on climate change would be cataclysmic. That's why we put forward a price on pollution that is bringing down our emissions and going to allow us to reach our targets at the same time as we put more money back in the pockets of Canadians with the climate action incentive 4 times a year. Mr. Speaker, we are supporting Canadians while we fight climate change.
This is all the time we have for question period today. C'est tout.
Okay.
We're going to come. We'll come to the point of orders in a moment. I have a list of point of orders, so we've put them all.
I kind of want to see the point of orders, guys.
But first, following discussions. We're
going to keep it going for a few minutes.
House, I understand that there's an agreement to observe a moment of silence to honor the Royal Canadian Air Force members who were injured and lost their lives near Petawawa. J'invite les honorables.
Oh, in the helicopter.
I invite honourable members to stand.
We're going to keep it going, though. I want to see the point of orders. I think Andrew Scheer has a good one. I think there's going to be stuff about the money, the billions of dollars. So normally we end it. Normally it's done, right? But we're going to keep it going a little bit. So if you want to stick around, hell yeah, man. Stick around. But if you want to leave and you want to come back tomorrow for question period, then that's so be it. But if not, I'll see you tomorrow. And if you want to stick around, let's do it for a couple of minutes. This is a pretty good question period. Tomorrow's going to be even more heated, and Friday's going to be insane. So make sure that you are subscribed and that you got the post notifications on and that you remember to come at the same time because it's going to be crazy the next couple of days. 2 days before summer break is going to be unhinged. All right. How long is this moment of silence? You're here for the long haul. All right. Let's see what they got.
We have a point of order. I believe the government House Leader is rising on a point of order.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding any standing order, special order, or usual practice of the House, I move that A, on the last allotted day in the supply period ending June 23rd, 2023, the proceedings on the Opposition Day motion shall conclude no later than 10:30 p.m. The House shall then proceed to the putting of the question on the motion, and then, if required for the taking of any division or divisions necessary to dispose of the motion, and the Speaker shall then put forthwith and successively, without further debate or amendment, every question necessary to dispose of the motions to concur in the main estimates for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2024, and to the supplementary estimates A for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2024, and to the passage at all stages of any bills based on the said estimates. B, Mr. Speaker, notices of opposed items in relation to the main estimates for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2024, and to the supplementary estimates A for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2024, listed on the notice paper being deemed withdrawn. C, Mr. Speaker, the recorded divisions on government legislation currently deferred to the expiry of the time provided for oral questions today be deemed further deferred to the conclusion of all proceedings in relation to the estimates tonight. D, Mr. Speaker, the motion standing on the order paper in the name of the Leader of the Government of the House of Commons related to the appointment of Harriet Soloway as Public Sector Integrity Commissioner pursuant to Standing Order 101.12 be deemed moved. A recorded vote be deemed requested, and deferred after the recorded division on a motion for third reading of Bill C-42, an act to amend the Canada Business Corporations Act and to make consequential and related amendments to other acts. E, Mr. Speaker, that in relation to Bill C9, an act to amend the Judges Act, the amendments to the motion respecting Senate amendments made to the bill be deemed withdrawn, and the motion respecting Senate amendments made to the bill standing on the notice paper be deemed adopted. Further, Mr. Speaker, Bill S8, an act to amend the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act to make consequential amendments to other acts and to amend the Immigration and Refugee Protection Regulations be deemed read a third time and passed. G, Mr. Speaker, Bill C-40, an act to amend the Criminal Code to make consequential amendments to other acts and to repeal a regulation, the miscarriage of justice reviews, be deemed read a second time and referred to the Standing Committee on Justice and Human Rights. H, Mr. Speaker, the Ways and Means motion number 18, notice of which was tabled on June 16, 2023, be deemed concurred in. A bill based thereon, standing in the order paper in the name of the Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations, entitled An Act Respecting the Recognition of Certain Métis Governments in Alberta, Ontario, and Saskatchewan, to give effect to treaties with those governments and to make consequential amendments to other acts, be deemed to have been introduced and read a first time, deemed read a second time, and referred to the Standing Committee on Indigenous and Northern Affairs. And finally, Mr. Speaker, I, that written questions dated June 20th, 2023, standing on the notice paper, be deemed to have been transferred to the order paper on Wednesday, June 21st, 2023, for the purposes of Standing Order 39. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
All those opposed to the honourable member moving the motion will please say nay. Agreed? The House has heard the terms of the motion. Que tous ceux qui s'opposent.
All those who are against the motion will please say nay.
Adopté.
Adopted. Carried.
Nous avons d'autres.
We have other points of order. The honourable member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, there has been consultation with parties. I think you'll note that there is unanimous consent for the following motion that, given that according to a report by the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, thousands of children have been forcibly deported by Russia from Ukraine to the Russian Federation. 2, the International Criminal Court has issued arrest warrants for Vladimir Putin and Maria Lvova-Belova. Apparently, there is no...
That's the stupidest arrest warrant.
Some nays, my apologies. We'll continue.
We'll go on to the honourable member for Chilliwack Hope.
Wow.
I'm afraid we can't hear you. Are you... I'll try that again.
Can you hear me now, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, can you hear me? No?
We'll give you a chance to. We do have quite a few other points of order, so what we're going to do is we'll come back to you as soon as we've got the technical issues resolved. Next, we'll go to the honourable member for Elgin, Middlesex, London.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I stand here in a little bit of disbelief.
Here we go.
Following some very difficult questions asked by my NDP colleague and friend from Winnipeg Centre, I watched, along with other members and colleagues here, as the Prime Minister sat down, directed at the member from Winnipeg Centre, with an F-bomb being dropped.
Whoa.
More of a thing. I wouldn't want it because, honestly, it'd just play it back. Unfortunately, I would ask for a formal apology and ask for this member, for the Prime Minister of Canada, to stand and apologize to my female colleague and my friend from Winnipeg Centre, especially on Indigenous Day. Thank you very much.
Wow. Welcome to politics.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Let's see what he does.
I'm pleased to let my answer to that question stand and say that I said absolutely nothing after finishing that answer.
Ooh.
Okay. Now we got the honourable member for King's Hand.
Now they're going to get malicious.
Order.
Cower away. Oh, he's getting roasted.
Here on
Cower away.
One stand up, and I think it's a fair list. Okay, we'll come to you shortly, but I mean, we've got another one, and we'll get to it. The honourable member for King's Hants.
Mr. Speaker, I rise on a point of order. This afternoon, I had the opportunity to ask the Right Honourable Prime Minister a question. I started my question with a preamble. I've supported it.
Nah, you had a non-question, buddy.
The Prime Minister, if I could hear how his government would administer differently the policies that are being articulated from the official opposition. I know that this made the official House Leader quite upset, but Mr. Speaker, I just want to see if I can have some parameters around how best I should frame my question. If I'm not able to ask it, I would be very interested in hearing from the Right Honourable Prime Minister and his response.
What a scumbag. How about you ask a question in your 30 seconds of time, buddy?
I've got...
Like everybody else. It's pretty simple.
Order.
Would be proud of being a prop.
Now, order. Now, in this House, we all make mistakes. We all do things we're not aware of or against the rules. And I've always liked to see them as a learning opportunity, not to explain my answers, but so that I've got everyone here so that you know why I said it wasn't a valid question. And the point I was looking at is on page 509. Ask a question that is within the administrative responsibility of the government or the individual ministers.
Within the amount of time.
Now, let me explain why. Order. Order. Come on, you want to hear an answer? Listen. So the reason I did that is there was a long preamble that really had nothing to do with administration. And I hear it from both sides. So I'm not pointing fingers at one side or the other.
Yeah, you are at the Liberals.
Go on forever. And then it's kind of hard to determine whether there's going to be a question tied to the criticism or the preamble that goes with it. And that's why I called it an illegal question. So that's the reason I said it wasn't a valid question. So when you're putting your questions together, I ask both sides to put something together that has to do with administration, and if you can, to make my life easier, make it clear that it has to do with administration right from the beginning. Thank you. Now we'll go to the Honourable Member for Caribou Prince George next. Okay, wait a minute. That has been settled. I don't want anybody challenging the chair. So if you...
Woo!
I invite you, hold it, wait. I invite you to come to my office after, make an appointment, and I'll explain to you what happened in here. The Honourable...
Laying down the law.
Caribou Prince George.
Mr. Speaker, Ottawa police officer Sergeant Eric Mueller was ambushed with two of his colleagues 3 weeks ago. Eric Mueller lost his life. Ottawa police officer was attacked this past weekend. London Fire Chief was viciously assaulted attending a fire emergency on the weekend. A nurse was punched and kicked this past weekend. Mr. Speaker, on the last day of this session, we need to send a message to our first responders and our heroes, frontline heroes, that violence against them is unacceptable. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, there have been discussions amongst parties, and I believe if you seek it, you shall find unanimous consent to pass the following motion. I move that notwithstanding any standing order, special order, or usual practice of this House, Bill C-321, an act to amend the Criminal Code, assaults against healthcare professionals and first responders, be amended by replacing the term healthcare professionals with healthcare workers throughout the entirety of the bill, be amended by replacing the term first responders with public safety personnel throughout the entirety of the bill, be amended by adding after section 269.02 the definition of a healthcare worker for the purpose of subsection 1. Healthcare worker includes any individual employed in a healthcare.
We're getting no's, and I just don't want it to go any longer than it has to. The Honourable for Medicine Hat Cards.
Move on.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. I'm seeking unanimous consent that the Minister of Public Safety appear before the Standing Committee of Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness for 2 hours, no later than Friday, June 23rd, regarding...
There's a long list of them, and in order to get through them, as soon as we hear some no's, we'll understand that the consultation that really should be taking place beforehand maybe didn't quite work out the way it should. We'll now go to the member for Oshawa.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The last few weeks we all agree the importance of victims' rights, and today I'm asking for unanimous consent from the House to adopt the following motion. I move that notwithstanding any standing order or usual practices of the House, Bill C-320, an act to amend the Corrections and Conditional Release Act, disclosure of information to victims.
I'm afraid we don't have unanimous consent on that either. We'll now.
Everything's just going to get blocked by the Liberals.
I believe the
so stupid.
Issues have been resolved. Order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The last time that I spoke in the House, I used language that was deemed unparliamentary. I would like to withdraw those remarks and apologize to the Speaker for the disorder that they caused.
Now that's how you apologize. Look at that. Not very hard, Liberals.
Honourable member for his apology, and
take note.
The apology kind of comes through the Speaker to the House, and I just want to clarify that it's not to me, it is to the House that the apology gets done. The Honourable member for Kelowna Lake Country is rising on a point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And this is on the point of order from my colleague from Elgin, Middlesex, London. And I was also witness to the Prime Minister saying the F word in question period today after his response to an opposition party member. And this is shocking and unparliamentary language. And I ask you, Mr. Speaker, to ask the Prime Minister to apologize because he did.
It's already been dealt with. We've dealt with that already. The Honourable Member for Lambton, Middlesex, London. The Honourable Member.
To be honest, I didn't hear an F word, and we just streamed the entire thing.
Close. Oh, I'm sorry.
Me and chat would have known if we heard the F word.
Mr. Speaker, question.
Oh boy, we would have known.
The Prime Minister kept deflecting on how the second carbon tax is going to hurt our farmers and put our food security and safety at risk. So I'd like unanimous consent to table the parliamentary budget off.
I'm afraid it sounds like we don't have that right now. The Honourable Member for Edmonton Griesbach is rising on a point of order.
Mr. Speaker, I believe if you seek it, you will find unanimous consent for the following motion. That given the rising tide of hate and violence directed towards the 2S LGBTQI community.
Once again, we're not getting any consent, and I just want to make sure that the people understand that when you're seeking unanimous consent, normally you check around to make sure that you have it beforehand and it worked out. And it doesn't sound like it worked out. The Honourable Member for
Denied.
Nose Hill is rising on a point of order.
Mr. Speaker, in light of your ruling made yesterday, I believe if you seek it, you'll find unanimous consent for the following motion, that the House direct the government to provide complete answers to members.
Afraid we don't have unanimous consent by the looks of it.
They're just trolling. They're saying no right away.
St. Margaret.
Without even hearing what it is.
Please.
I'm hoping on this one, Mr. Speaker, there'll be agreement because I'd like to table a quote from the Minister of Finance's speech from the fall economic update where she said that the government should not pour inflationary fuel.
Wow, Liberals are so immature.
Even a unanimous consent. The Honourable Member for South Shore St. Margaret next.
This is our taxpayers' money at work. They're saying no before the person even gets up.
I realize that sometimes, some of the rules are used to help us gain what we want in the House and then just kind of postpone things, but at least let the Honourable Member get a few words out before we know. So we're sure that we don't. A few words. I'm very specific on a few. The Honourable Member for South Shore St. Margaret's.
Apparently, Mr. Speaker.
No, there they go.
Want me to say thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the House knows, I serve as the chair of the Industry Committee in this House, and through that...
Wow, this is disgusting behavior.
Volkswagen contracts, and the two Volkswagen contracts that have been available...
Now, order. Is the Honourable Member asking for unanimous consent? What is he asking for? I can't make out what he's saying. I'll let him start over.
Wow.
I'll reinform the House that I serve as the Vice Chair of the Industry Committee. and as such in that role have had access to the two Volkswagen contracts. And those two contracts, which we know, the parliamentary budget officer has said are already $3 billion over budget. So
I believe we're getting in debate. We'll go to the honourable member for Calgary Forest Lawn that got...
Oh, this is so dumb, guys.
Order.
Mr. Speaker, I think I've intercepted what looks like the Liberals' plan to balance the budgets, and I'd like to table this document with the House today.
It's a blank page.
Are there any other points of order that we're going to go to?
Holy shit!
Parkland.
10th time's the charm, Mr. Speaker. I'm seeking consent from this House that an order of the House to issue for all memoranda, briefing notes, emails.
Obviously, there wasn't the consultation done beforehand, so I'm going to have to shut that one down. The honourable member for Caribou Prince George now.
I rise on a point of order directed at you, Mr. Speaker. I know that Mr. Speaker, uncharacteristically, you may have let your emotions get the better of you today, and you yelled something unparliamentary towards one of my colleagues across the way here. I thought maybe you might want to apologize.
I don't remember.
Whoa!
Reserved or unparliamentary.
Hey, everybody's held to the same standard. That is corruption.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to ask for unanimous consent to allow the member from Edmonton Griesbach to read his unanimous consent motion to this House.
Hear, hear.
This is just a zoo. Everyone's getting caught up in semantics. Stephanie, Conservative member of Parliament, it looks like that Stephanie is approaching the chair saying, what the hell's going on? This is ridiculous.
Okay. We're good.
This is embarrassing, guys. Like, question period, as crazy as it is.
3:40, pursuant to order made on
this is embarrassing.
June 23rd, 2022. The House will now proceed to the taking of the deferred recorded division on the motion at second reading stage of Bill 275, C-275, under private members' business. Convoquez les députés.
Call in the members.
That was interesting.
That was interesting. Hot mic. All right, everybody. Now we're done. I can pause that. Holy crap. Oh my God, there's so many of you still here. I wasn't looking. I didn't have that screen pulled up. Awesome. Wow, there's more people watching the point of orders than there are question periods. That's awesome. We got a dedicated audience to, Canadian politics and stuff. That's where we're going to end it, everybody. I appreciate all of you, plus even more, sticking around for the points of order. This was awesome. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing to see our government act like this. I mean, the embarrassment didn't come from the Conservative Party of Canada or even NDP, which is awesome. It's all the Liberals. The Liberals are just heckling. They don't want to listen. They don't even want to better our country. They are stuck in their ways of making Canada just a perpetual shithole, and it's disgusting. So anyways, same time tomorrow, 11:15 Pacific Standard, 2:15 Eastern Standard. Thursdays are wild. And also, again, as you can see, tensions are rising from summer break coming and being just a sliver away. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. Hope you like the stream. Just a reminder to hit that like button if you haven't yet, and check to see if you're subscribed, since I do have multiple channels, right? Mistersunshinebaby and Northern Patriot. Sayonara, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day.